Downtown Advisory Committee for 2021. And I am Claudia Troisi, Chairman of the Downtown Advisory Committee. We will start the meeting with the call to order and the Pledge of Allegiance. If Mr. Hunt would like to do the call, you want to do the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, let's do
You want to do the roll call first?
Please.
That's fine. Good morning, Chair Troisi.
Here.
Committee Member Seeberger. Here. Committee Member Sweeten. And welcome, by the way. And Committee Member Ashton.
Here.
And Committee Member Andrioff. Here. And for the record, the agenda shows Andrew Andrioff, and I believe it should be Michael Andrioff, correct?
No. I'm Andrew. The agenda's correct.
Okay, so we've got your name tag wrong.
Name tag is wrong, correct.
Okay, so Andrew is correct. So for the record, the video record, Andrew Andrioff is in the chambers with us today. Committee Member Manley.
Here.
And finally, Committee Member Wright, I believe, is joining us via Zoom. Can we pull him up? There we go.
I'm here.
We can hear you, Mr. Wright.
Thank you.
So the protocols for the meeting, given COVID, they have relaxed a little bit. We are allowing, the city is allowing testifiers, the public, in the chambers, but only with limited capacity. I counted the seats this morning, and there's 18 seats available. I don't think that's an issue for this particular meeting, but perhaps in the future. But also, there's people who are watching that are just interested in government affairs in general, so it's good information. If the capacity of the chambers is reached, then people will have to wait outside in the lobby. We will call 2 names for testifiers, so you can anticipate if you're coming up to speak next. In baseball parlance, it would be on deck, so to speak. And then they would have to return back to the lobby. We will ask people to not sit in the chambers if they're not interested in the particular item that is being discussed, and to wait for their item to be called. That's voluntary. We're not going to enforce that. We're not going to ask them to show us which item you're interested in, et cetera. The city has a social distancing and mask policy still. While we're conducting business in City Hall, we're expected to comply with the mask order and the social distancing. The exception, as you'll note for me, is when someone is speaking. We do think it is much easier to understand people if they take their mask off while they're speaking. We've got pretty good social distancing here. Scott and I may be violating it a little bit. For the record, we're both fully vaccinated, so I'm not worried about Scott. Any questions on the protocols?
I don't think so.
Oh, I should have mentioned, if the applicants want to be in the chambers, they're allowed in. Even if we're at capacity, we'll ask them to be in the corner like where Richard is now. Likewise with city staff. I believe our applicants are all via Zoom today, so we can address that later. So unless there's any other questions, I'll turn it back over to the chair. There should be a little box to your left, and you hit the, I believe it's in the lower right corner. While we're waiting for that, I will add one more thing, is if we have a combination of public speakers and Zoom speakers, the accepted protocol, and we're working with the clerk's office, and we have to kind of follow suit with the city clerk's office on how the city council operates. The consensus is we would ask the public speakers to speak first, and then they can vacate the chambers, perhaps, and then go to the Zoom speakers. Just
Okay.
so it looks like we all have our mics available now.
All right. Well, with that, if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. The first item on the agenda, The first item on the agenda is the approval of the July 22nd, 2020 meeting. Anybody wish to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you, Rich. All right, so that's 3 ayes. We have 2 people who were not here previously who couldn't vote then. So it's before 2.
Madam Chair, I was distracted during the voting. How would you record that?
We had 4 yeses. No, I'm sorry, including Rick, there'd be 5 yeses, and 2 people who were not here previously who I'm assuming are abstaining.
I was here.
I'm sorry, Heather.
Are you looking at me as though I wasn't there? I was there.
You were there. Okay, I'm sorry. So it's just Lauren who wasn't there.
I wasn't there either, so I abstained from the vote.
So I had the right number. I had the wrong people. I apologize.
4-2.
All right, so it was 5-2 with 2 people abstaining because they were not here previously.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move on to any communication from anyone in the audience who are here for items not on the agenda. I see no one in the chamber. Is there anyone on Zoom?
And Madam Chair, we had no requests to speak on non-agenda items.
Very good. Then the first item on the agenda is the consideration of a tentative parcel map, development plan, and regular coastal permit to allow the construction of a 3-story, 3-unit condominium development at 806 North Cleveland. And I believe Mr. Richard is going to be the staff presentation.
Good morning, Chair Troisi. And do we want to do disclosures real quick before I get into my presentation?
Yes, sorry, it's been a bit a while. So yes, we'll start with Mr. Eisendorf. You have disclosures, sir?
No, I visited the site. I lived down the street for about 5 or 6 years, so I'm very familiar with the area.
Very good. Mr. Ashton?
No disclosures.
Where am I here? Mr. Seeberger?
I've only read the materials.
All right, and Ms. Manley?
No disclosures.
Ms. Sweeten?
No disclosures.
All right, and I read the material and I did visit the site. And with that, we'll begin.
All right. Good morning, Chair Troisi, members of the Downtown Advisory Committee. Name is Richard Greenbauer in the Planning Department. Here to present a tentative map, a development plan, and regular coastal permit in the downtown subdistrict 5 area. I know these seem kind of repetitive, but it is the current state of redevelopment within our downtown area and further south in Oceanside. So what we have is a request for the 3 entitlements. And it includes a request to demolish a 464 square foot, 1-bedroom, 1-bath residence, small bungalow, and a detached garage. In place of that, they will construct a 3-story, 3-unit condominium complex totaling 9,000 square feet in size with a 1,000 square foot rooftop deck. As I previously stated, I've placed an aerial on the overhead just to show the location north of Neptune, 3 lots in off of Neptune and a corner of Cleveland Street. The property is in the downtown district, has a high-density residential local coastal program land use plan designation and corresponding subdistrict 5 designation for high-density residential. In reviewing the project, the applicant has submitted and has maintained all the development standards for the site and in accordance with Subdistrict 5 development standards. You see that it will create a 33 dwelling units per acre for the 3 units. They will provide all 6 spaces within tandem configured parking and maintain all required setbacks and height requirements for the project. And looking at the overall architectural design, staff focused on compatibility with the neighborhood, showing how the architecture blends in and is consistent with the kind of pattern redevelopment, using very simplistic forms and cubism-style architectural design, bringing forth very high-end materials, board batten, intermixed with some stone veneers, as well as a nice heavy glazing that can withstand the elements so close to the ocean. The next image is a massing study that was prepared by the applicant showing the context of the surrounding community, how it would be redeveloped. And as you can see, it is consistent with the row home type development in the area, as well as the multifamily residential to the west across Cleveland Street. With that, staff has determined that the 3-unit condominium project meets all development standards within the zoning code, as well as being consistent with general plan policy A of the land use elements, with dealing with architectural form treatments and materials to improve the visual image of the surrounding neighborhood. Taking that lot and demolishing the old bungalow and bringing forth a nice modern 3-unit will help provide additional housing within Oceanside and is consistent with the general plan. With that, staff recommends that the Downtown Advisory Committee recommend approval of the tentative map, development plan, and regular coastal permit to the Community Development Commission for final action, and I'll make myself available for any questions. We do have the applicant and his architect, Mr. Daniel Still and Peter Trevino. They are in attendance via Zoom if you have any specific questions for them. And that concludes my presentation.
All right. Are there any questions from the audience? Seeing none, are there any questions from Zoom? Going back and forth is not going to be easy, I can see. Sorry. All right. In that case, is there any questions from the dais? Mr. Wright, do you have any comments?
No. For the record, I had no disclosures.
I'm sorry.
No worries. And for me, it looks like a great project. Certainly fits right in with what's there now, and I will be supporting the project.
Thank you, Rick. All right. Any questions for the applicant? All right. Does anyone wish to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we support the project. Support staff recommendation.
Very good. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
All right. There's a first and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Could do a roll call, I think.
Okay.
Particularly given Zoom, et cetera.
No problem.
You want me to call the names?
Thank you.
Chair Troisi?
Yes.
Committee Member Ashton,
Yes.
Andrioff,
Yes.
Committee Member Manley,
Yes.
Committee Member Sweeten,
Yes.
Member Seeberger,
Yes.
and via Zoom, Committee Member Wright.
Yes.
We'll mark that as 7 in favor, 0 against. The motion passes.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a consideration of a development plan, conditional use permit, and regular coastal permit for the construction and operation of a single-story, 1,073 square foot drive-through restaurant on a vacant 0.25 acre site located at 801 North Coast Highway. And again, Mr. Greenbauer will be the planner. Oh, I'm very sorry. Scott will be the planner. And we'll go through again, Mr. Androff, any disclosures?
Visited the site and I spoke with some local residents.
Mr. Ashton,
No disclosures.
Mr. Wright,
No disclosures.
and Mr. Sweetburger.
Seeberger, I've just read the materials.
And who am I missing? Ms. Sweeten.
I visited the site and read the materials.
All right. And I also visited the site and I read the materials.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
I'm very sorry. And
Mrs. Manley.
Heather, I'm sorry.
That's
Ms.
okay.
Manley.
I'm familiar with the site. I read the materials, and I do have a daughter that works at Starbucks, and we've discussed volumes.
Ah, okay. Very good. Thank you for disclosing. All right. With that, it's up to you, Scott.
Yeah, thank you. Scott Nightingale, Senior Planner from the Plan Division, here to present Agenda Item 4B for the consideration of a development plan, conditional use permit, and coastal permit for the construction and operation of a new single-story, 1,073 square foot drive-through restaurant on a vacant 0.25 acre site located at 801 North Coast Highway. The applicant is Hannibal Petrosi, and they will be on Zoom. Synopsis here, they are asking for a development plan to construct the actual single-story, 24-foot tall, 1,073 square foot drive-through restaurant. The conditional use permit is required per Article 1220 of the Downtown Zoning Ordinance, which requires CUP for any fast food restaurant with a drive-through or drive-up service. The applicant is proposing for a drive-through restaurant / coffee shop at this location. Therefore, the CUP is necessary. Majority of the building will be dedicated to service and kitchen prep, while the remaining area would accommodate 2 ADA accessible bathrooms, access from the exterior of the building. The attached 550 square foot patio, outdoor patio, would accommodate 16 outdoor seats with in addition 8 parking stalls surrounding the building. The requirement based on the seating is actually only 5 stalls or 5 parking stalls, so they will be seating the parking. And lastly, the regular coastal permit is required based on the site's location. The site is within the non-appealable jurisdiction of the coastal area. Here's an image of the site. It's located on the northwest corner of North Coast Highway and Neptune Way, surrounded by a hotel to the north. Directly to the east, you have a service station and another hotel motel. I believe it's Motel 6. And directly to the south, you have a vacant parcel with the liquor store further down. And directly to the west, you have a mixed of uses, multifamily, and the rear portion of the hotel. The site is Zone 7B, which permits recreation, commercial, retail, and residential uses, as well as drive-through restaurants. Here's an image of the site. Little background about this site and just the downtown in general. Back in February 22nd, 2020, the City Council approved a zone amendment and a local coastal program amendment to the downtown zoning ordinance to streamline the review process for commercial uses and to add non-controversial commercial uses to the matrix. As a part of this, we also included the allowance of drive-throughs within this zoning district, which is zoning district 7B. This zone amendment and local coastal program amendment is actually being reviewed at the moment with coastal staff. So this approval is contingent upon the Coastal Commission's approval. So as of right now, after this approval, we'll be waiting for coastal to approve the amendment. So can't move forward to coastal until that's approved. So here's an image of the site. As you can see, it's vacant. Here's an image of the northern, looking to the north. You have an older hotel directly to the north, also zone 7B. Here's the image of the service gas station and hotel directly to the east, across the street. And directly to the south here, you have another vacant lot. So as you can see, there's an eclectic type of uses, land uses surrounding this site. The applicant does feel that this is a good site for this type of use. Here's an image of the site plan. The design, we work with the applicant to eliminate the curb cuts off of North Coast Highway. As of right now, there's 2 curb cuts that are located just off of North Coast Highway. So those will be removed as a part of this proposal. And there's an additional curb cut located closer to the east section of Neptune. That'll also be closed as well, and a new ingress egress will come off the more western portion. We work with the applicant to push the building a little further back so we could wrap the drive-through around. That way we can add for additional stacking. We all know the nature of Starbucks. That's a somewhat popular use. So based on the limited size constraints, this is the proposal we've had. The zoning ordinance requires 5 queued up spaces from the menu board. They are providing that. In addition, they also have 4 additional queued up spaces based on large car stacking from the pickup window. So this meets the requirements as set forth in the development standards. This is a little bit of a different model. There will be no customer service from the interior of the building. All orders will be for walk-up from the exterior of the building. There will be some covered patio seating. This model has worked well for Starbucks. We actually have a Starbucks that was just recently constructed a few years ago off of Mission Avenue that is functioning in the same operational manner. The building is somewhat pedestrian friendly. They do have elevations, or they have a hatched area that leads from all sections of the street frontages from North Coast Highway as well as Neptune Way. Knowing the nature of this area being a visitor serving hotel or visitor accommodation area, they've taken that into account. That's why they're providing the hatched areas off the streets and also the additional seating. This development would include a contemporary design that includes a mix of materials that are consistent with the newer developments within the area. The building would consist of smooth plaster finishes, stone veneer wall coverings, metal wall coverings, black painted metal canopies, an open lattice patio, and enhanced pavers and clear glazing windows. When reviewing this project, staff reviewed the project based on the following for findings and approval: general plan and land use compliance. The building and use of the building will add to the balance of the commercial land uses within a visitor serving district. The proposed commercial use would introduce an economically viable commercial restaurant within the Coast Highway corridor. The restaurant will be consistent with the visitor serving uses within the area, will not impact the surrounding area. As discussed, the project will meet the development standards as specified within the downtown zoning ordinance for development compatibility. Seeing that the project is located within the local coastal program, There will be no public coastal access impacts, nor will there be any adverse impacts on public coastal views, as well as no public parking impacts. So with that, staff recommends that the Downtown Advisory Committee recommend approval of this development plan, use permit, and regular coastal permit, Community Development Commission. That concludes my presentation. The applicants are available via Zoom if you have any further questions. Thank you. I'm going to go to the sidebar here because I'm actually operating the Zoom.
Okay. All right, does anyone from the audience have any comments? Seeing no one, does anyone on Zoom have any comments?
Madam Chair, the only speakers we have on Zoom are the applicants that are available for questions.
Okay, in that case, we'll go to the committee. Is there anyone who has any questions?
I just have a quick question for staff. When do you anticipate approval from the Coastal Commission on the zone amendments? And are there any other projects being held up while you're waiting for that?
Committee Member Ashton, that's a good question. Yes, we're hoping that the project, the amendment for Article 12 will be approved sometime this year, knowing Coastal's workload and our experience, this could take possibly longer, but we're being optimistic and hoping that it could get approved sometime this year. And yes, there's some additional items that are being held up as well. The density cap removal, as well as the TOD district that we discussed not too long ago. But yes, those are the amendments that are being held up as well.
Wow. I didn't realize, that was a great question. I didn't realize it was going to be that much longer. Any further questions?
I did have a question for either staff or the applicant. Is this site going to be operated 24 hours? I saw the drive-through looked like it was going to be 24-hour operation, but limited hours on walk-up.
Committee Member Andrioff, per the memo, we have the proposed hours for walk-up and pick-up ordering from 4:30 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week. The drive-through would be available 24 hours. If the applicant has any additional information, they can add to that as well. But yeah, that's what they provided: 24 hours for drive-through and limited hours for walk-up from 7:30 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Okay. And another question I had, and Scott, I'd reach out to you regarding the average transaction time per drive-through customer. I think given here, it shows 9 cars could queue in this line, and then probably an additional 3 or 4 in the parking lot before it actually reached Neptune. So I don't have any concerns that there's going to be overflow onto Coast Highway. So I think it's a great project. I think it's going to be a great addition to downtown.
Is there any other comments? Ms. Manley?
I'd like to know if the applicant has an estimate at peak hours, how many cars are flowing through at a given time, because as Committee Member Andrioff alluded to, I'm concerned about the overflow from Neptune onto Coast Highway.
I will get the applicant on the Zoom here. Kay or Hannibal, do you want to help answer this question?
Hi, this is Kay Su. I am looking at the trip generation. I believe the project will have in the morning peak hour, there will be 43 trips. Half of them coming in, half of them going out. In the PM peak hour, it's about the same number of trips, roughly 22 cars inbound and outbound.
I'm sorry, to elaborate, I'm not sure I understand what that answer was. The 22 cars an hour, 22 cars?
At once?
I'm not quite sure I understood the response. Could you elaborate, please?
The projection of the traffic is 22 trips coming in the morning peak hour, and the same number of trips will be going out. Combined will be 43 trips in the morning peak hour, and in the afternoon is the number of trips are the same.
So I actually asked this question to Scott. I was curious what the peak drive-through customer per hour was, and the response I got was 60 vehicles per hour at roughly an average transaction time of 1 minute per customer. Is that correct?
That's correct, because the number I mentioned has excluded pass-by trips. So if you look at the total trips attracted by the project is roughly 50 trips, including both inbound and outbound for both morning and the afternoon.
Now, when you say trips, are you referring to customers that are driving and parking there, or just entering and exiting the space?
Any trip that goes through the driveway, whether they are going to park or they are going to drive through, both type of trips are included in this projection.
Are both of you?
I guess I'm satisfied with that answer.
Yeah, I guess where I think I have the same concerns everyone else does. I don't want traffic backing up on Coast Highway. And at one point in time, how many cars will be going through the drive-through, then backing up on Neptune, then ultimately getting on Coast Highway? And I don't know, is the estimate like, hey, we could fit 20 cars in that area around the building? Because you know it's going to back up onto Neptune. And then if the traffic keeps flowing, backing up onto Coast Highway, is that 20 cars? And is your peak service period going to exceed 20 cars at one time? Maybe that's another way to ask the question. And that's for the applicant. I've driven by that. Unfortunately, I go to that one, take my daughter to the one off Mission, and that traffic backs up off that side street onto Mission, and it causes problems. And I think it's going to be worse, maybe not worse on Coast Highway, but it's as dangerous. Especially coming, I think I saw the map, people are coming off that 76, coming around that turn, and I think you're running right into that.
And
that's a concern of mine. I think it's beautiful, and it's a great area, and it improves that area, but the traffic is a concern.
Is the applicant, hello? Is the
Yes.
applicant going to be responding?
Yes, for the project, there's a local transportation assessment prepared and approved by the traffic division. We found that in the morning peak hour, there'll be a slight delay, which is kind of a pre-existing condition, but there's no significant impact for the morning and in the afternoon. That the project will not result in a significant impact.
Was there any discussion about if, in fact, the concerns that some of the committee members have with respect to the backing up of the traffic, to direct people to stack going west on Neptune instead of stacking going east to back onto Coast Highway, recognizing as I'm saying this that the natural tendency is going to be to come off Coast Highway, go in and make a big U, but I'm not sure how it could be done, but I have to believe that during your discussions in this application that there had to have been some discussions about possibly being able to redirect the traffic so it's stacking going, they'd be making a left turn into the Starbucks as opposed to be making a right turn in so they're not stacking onto Coast Highway. And I'm not sure how that could be achieved, but certainly it would alleviate the concerns that everyone has about the traffic stacking on Coast Highway, which I would also agree is a concern.
Yes, the incoming traffic are projected 90% coming from Coast Highway and 10% from the residential area to the west. That 90% can be absorbed with the speed of the drive-through windows. So with everything considered, there will not be a queue back up to Coastal Highway, according to the model.
Is there a contingency plan in place for the applicant should the traffic become an issue on Coast Highway? I mean, we've seen it with In-N-Out Burger, and we've seen it in various locations. Again, the Starbucks on Mission. I think that it is incumbent upon us to have that as a request for traffic mitigation should it become a problem.
My understanding is that Starbucks has a program to dedicate on mobile ordering, and they have a space dedicated for that so that they can speed up the process. And they will also ask any large order customers to use the parking lot, and so that it doesn't hold up the queue. And this is something, according to Starbucks, has been working well at other locations.
If I can add to that, we've been working with the applicant as well as the traffic division, knowing that we will condition the project for them to submit a management plan. All commercial developments need to have at least a management plan. So within that management plan, we'll ask them to have some drive-through operational requirements if there is any stacking issues, whether employees need to go out with, similar to In-N-Out, with iPads to move the traffic along, or ask them to park within parking stalls so they can bring items out to move the traffic within the drive-through. So that actually will be required as a condition within the management plan, and we'll work with them on drafting that.
I have one other concern. The suggestion that the staffing would only be 4 employees at any given time. I understand it's a small facility, but that seems like very small amount of staffing. And I'd like to know how the parking for the staff who are working will be guaranteed, not only so that they can get to work on time, but also to ensure their safety as they're walking out of the buildings, perhaps late in the evening or very early in the morning, in an area that is known for transient activity and the like.
I'm going to refer that question to Kay, the traffic engineer.
The parking lot will be well lighted. Maybe Hannibal, can you respond to that as well?
Hello, hi. My name is Hannibal Petrosi. Good morning, Madam Chair and member of committee. We've been working with the staff and also Starbucks on this very small site, as you can see, is about 10,000 square feet. It is really difficult to provide as many parking as we have in here. We got 8 parkings in there, where it's required only 5 parking. As far as the safety of the employee, as Kay mentioned, it would be well lighted, and there will be security cameras, all over, as they have planned in every facility that they have. So they take the safety of their employee and the customers in a very high measure and very seriously. So I'm sure that they do have a plan for that, and if that's required, it can be submitted for the review. As far as having 4 employees, this is a very small facility. The maximum would be 4 employees. Sometimes they do have 2 employees. At the 4 employees would be at the peak hour, where all the customers are in and the parkings is full. So we don't see any problem with having the employee going in and out, especially at the late night, where they live. So we're not anticipating to have a huge queuing line or customers, at the late night where employees leaving, or early morning when employees arriving. So we don't see any problem with that.
I have a traffic flow related question for staff. Looking forward to the implementation of the Coast Highway Corridor Plan. Did I remember correctly that the road narrowing goes that far north and that there would potentially be a roundabout right in that area? And if so, is the traffic plan based on that future look for that area?
Committee Member Ashton, yeah, the Traffic Division has taken that into account when reviewing the traffic study. And so we're well aware that there will be a roundabout there and there will be some narrowing. So they've taken that account when designing the project. That was the main reason for taking out the ingress egress off North Coast Highway, because originally they had some exiting off of Coast Highway. And so we worked with them on redesigning that. So yeah, we are well aware of that, and we've taken that in consideration.
I have a thought. I don't know if this can be towards staff. So if there's a large order, the applicant's saying that they're going to park in one of these parking stalls. However, if you have a line going and there's queuing, you're not going to have access to park in any of these stalls. That's going to obstruct traffic further. Is there any possibility if they were to exit onto Neptune and then maybe install a loading space, like a 5-minute loading space right outside the property, so that if they're exiting, they're onto the street, they're not blocking up any further traffic within the parking lot?
Committee Member Andrew.
Suggestion.
I'm sorry?
Great suggestion.
Thank you.
I'll have to work with our transportation division on that. I'm not sure if we can allocate public street parking for private businesses. That's something we'd have to circle back with either Public Works and our transportation division.
But don't we do similar things for loading, unloading for businesses? Hey, I mean, that's generally an unused space right there. I think there's a parking lot for the old motel right next to it.
There are I think it's 5-minute loading, unloading spots downtown.
I don't think you need longer than that.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I agree with you. It's certainly something worth exploring.
We can definitely work with traffic to look into this.
Okay. Maybe that could be part of the management plan.
Just a thought.
Yeah. Good idea. Mr. Wright, do you have any comments?
Thanks, Claudia. This question is for Scott. We're seeing a trend towards these drive-through only fast food restaurants. And I'm wondering, how do you calculate the parking requirements for a drive-through only operation?
Committee Member Wright, for drive-through operations, the zoning ordinance requires 5 queued up spaces measured from the menu board where you order your food. There's no actual requirement for from the pickup window. So they are meeting the 5 queued spaces. They have an additional 4 to 5 spaces, whichever way you're measuring a car, up to the pickup window as well. So in total, they have almost 9 from the pickup window. So the requirement is 5. They're providing the 5 with an additional 4 from the pickup window.
I understand those are the queued spaces, but parking, Scott, how do you figure out how much parking they need on site?
There's no parking requirement for drive-throughs. There's no actual ratio requirement, just the queued up space requirement. The parking for restaurants is based on 1 seat per every 50 square, or 1 space for every 50 square feet of seating. And so that was taken into consideration.
Right, that's why I asked. But so are you requiring parking for the outdoor seating?
We are, yes. And based on the outdoor seating that they're proposing, they actually only need, I believe, 5 spaces as depicted in the memo.
Yeah, I think you said 5
spaces. Yeah, and they're providing 8.
Right. Okay, and I agree with my fellow committee members that I think there's, potentially a traffic issue, especially in the morning. This is on the way to Camp Pendleton for many Marines, and I think it could be a bit of a nightmare. I'm not sure we'll know till we try, but I will be supporting the project. Thank you.
Are there other questions from any of the other committee members? All right. I know this is a little at the back end, but Scott, I don't recall seeing a landscape plan. It's a very attractive building, and I personally like the architecture, but it is a little severe, and I don't recall seeing any landscape plans at all.
They do have a landscape plan. Doesn't look like it's on this attachment here. They are providing 16% of the entire site to be landscaped. The requirement is 15% with some additional right-of-way trees.
So they are adding some trees?
They are adding some canopy trees on the right-of-way and some low-lying shrubs and ground cover within the site.
Thank you for the trees.
Yeah.
All righty. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion?
I'll make that motion.
All right. Mr. Androff is making a motion. Anyone want to make a second?
I'll second that motion.
Ms. Sweeten is making the second. All right. All in favor? Raise your right hand. Mr. Wright?
Sorry.
That's all right.
Can I just make a note that there's no motion? Is it a motion to?
You are correct. Mr. Androff, would you like to make the motion to approve?
I will make a motion to approve staff's recommendation for this project.
I will vote yes on that motion.
I can word that better if you'd like.
How about the Starbucks at 801 South Coast Highway? North Coast Highway.
Make a motion to approve staff's recommendation of approval of the development plan, the conditional use permit, and regular coast permit for the construction and operation of a new single-story 10,073 square foot drive-through restaurant located at 801 North Coast Highway.
All righty. So let's try one more time. All in favor, please raise your hand. And Mr. Wright, one more time, please.
Aye.
And all opposed?
Madam Chair, we'll record that as 6 in favor, 1 against. Committee member Manley.
Okay.
Motion passes.
Just as a after the vote comment, I am voting yes because of the management plan. I love the project. I think it's very needed for that area. I think it's a great addition to west of 5 for downtown. But I do think there is concerns about the stacking, and I am looking forward to that being addressed as a backup plan in the management plan.
To make a comment, my no is because I don't feel that the plan is solvent enough for the issues that were brought forth by the committee.
Thank you for that. All right, next item on the agenda are discussion items, and the first item up is the general plan update. And I would
Russ, do you have a PowerPoint?
Thank you for your patience. Good morning, Chair Troisi, committee members. I'm Russ Cunningham with the city's planning division. My privilege to be managing a comprehensive update of the city's general plan under the direction of Development Services Director Rego, City Planner Hunt, and with the support of planners Rob Dimohowski, Shannon Vitale, and Stephanie Cervantes. I will share with you today our various project components, speak to efforts we've made to date for the course of the last year, share some highlights from community input, speak a little bit to state and regional priorities that we hope to address as part of this project, and discuss next steps, and I do look forward to your questions. I have tried to prepare the world's most efficient PowerPoint slide. I have one slide. It'll be somewhat dense, and hopefully it will be readable. So with respect to project components, this is a multifaceted project. I should note that this is the second phase of the city's comprehensive general plan update. First phase was adopted in August of 2019, and that included the introduction of 2 new optional general plan elements, an economic development element and an energy and climate action element, along with the city's first climate action plan. And these 3 adopted documents have provided significant policy direction for this second phase of the general plan update, which involves the updating of the city's existing 7 general plan elements, some of which are in fact over 45 years old. The land use element was last updated in 1986, so 35 years ago. These elements include elements that address state mandated topic areas, and those include land use, mobility, housing, conservation and open space, safety, and noise. In 1990, the city adopted a community facilities element, which I think speaks to this city's commitment to providing high-quality public facilities and services to the community. That element, community facilities element, will also be updated as part of this process. I should note that this will be the first time that all of these elements have been updated concurrently. This is truly the city's first comprehensive general plan update that will ensure that there is consistency, policy consistency across all 7 of these elements. I think you're also aware that there are a couple of targeted planning efforts associated with this project as well, including the South Morrow Hills Community Plan, which is meant to address the extreme development pressure facing our agricultural district and the challenges to the long-term economic viability of farming. And in fact, today, the City Council we will bring before the City Council a policy framework for this South Morrow Hills Community Plan. The Smart and Sustainable Corridors Specific Plan, largely funded by Caltrans, looks to channel most of the city's future housing and employment growth into our major commercial corridors. You're probably aware of the Coast Highway Incentive District, approved almost 2 years ago now. We will be looking to build upon zoning incentives established as part of that incentive district for Coast Highway and apply similar concepts to the city's major inland commercial corridors, Mission Avenue, Oceanside Boulevard, and Vista Way, with the intent to revitalize these corridors, to encourage higher and better use on many sites, more efficient use on many sites, to achieve synergies between commercial and residential development, to meet much of our housing need and our regional fair share of housing demand within these corridors, and to the extent that we can, complete these streets. That is to say, make these streets workable and functional, safe, and convenient for all modes of transportation. With respect to efforts to date, we've been at this for just about a year now. We kicked off the project in February, late February of last year. We have thus far conducted a very robust and broad community outreach effort. We've held well over 50 meetings that include panel discussions, that include virtual community workshops, what we called virtual office hours to engage residents at the neighborhood level. You may know that the city is delineated into 17 neighborhood planning areas. We conducted, I believe, over 25 office hour sessions devoted to those neighborhood planning areas. We have conducted several online surveys. We have 1,600 people on our interested parties list, and we send out regular email updates to that interested parties list, which continues to grow. One can sign up for that interested parties list on our website, which is at onwardoceanside.com, and I do encourage you to visit that website. A lot of materials that will provide you a lot of insight on what we're up to. We've also been working on the South Morrow Hills policy framework that again goes before the City Council this afternoon. It's important to point out that what goes before the Council this afternoon is not the plan itself. It is a high-level framework that outlines the basic concepts that will require more detail to become a plan. We're looking for input from the community and from the city council to essentially flesh out that plan and the details thereof. We have been working hard on a draft housing element update. You may know that the housing element is the only general plan element that is subject to a state prescribed deadline. Ostensibly, that deadline has already passed. April 15th was the deadline to submit a updated housing element to Housing and Community Development for certification review. However, there is a grace period, a 120-day grace period, so we have until August 15th to submit that document, and we are looking to get that document in front of the Planning Commission and the City Council here within the next few months. The housing element addresses the city's need to accommodate its regional fair share of housing growth. It looks at constraints to housing and how we can overcome those constraints. And it establishes what's called a housing sites inventory, which is a parcel level accounting of properties throughout the city that we have determined have the capacity to provide for additional housing. The housing element in draft form is available on our city website and our project website for public review. And we are in the midst of preliminary review by state staff, and we expect within the next month or so to have comments from the state that we can respond to. We have also been working on a variety of technical studies that address land use patterns, community design, the transportation network, natural resources, natural hazards, economic conditions, and market dynamics. Staff is vetting these technical studies prepared by our consultant team. Once those studies have addressed staff input, they will be posted on our project webpage for your review. We do anticipate that these tech studies will help us in developing policies, and we do hope that the community will take a look at these documents. They're fairly voluminous, but based on one's particular interest, we hope that folks will take a look at these materials, which I think really establish a very complete picture of existing conditions in the city, essentially what we have to work with as we look to the future and establish a vision for that future. In terms of community input, I did mention that we have engaged in what I believe is a very robust and inclusive outreach effort. We have engaged over 500 people actively in these workshops, in ad hoc meetings. I've been before the Chamber of Commerce and other groups to speak to what we're up to and to field questions and solicit input. I will say that we have heard considerable concern about growth and change. There is some aversion to the idea that the city will grow and that the city will add more housing and jobs. There's concern about traffic congestion. There's concern about how growth will change the character of the community. Now, we have found that those concerns and attitudes toward growth and change vary based really on demographics. So I'm going to be perfectly straightforward and say that the majority of the people who have chosen to participate in this effort are generally older and more financially secure and longer standing residents than the average Oceansider. And many of these folks came here some time ago because they liked the community the way it was when they came here some time ago. So I think to some extent that is their basis for resistance to change, and that's somewhat understandable. At the same time, the younger demographic, which we have not engaged successfully, but those under 35 years of age have demonstrated much more interest in providing more housing in providing more employment opportunities, in providing more commercial amenities within the community, and generally more openness to growth and change. So I think it's important for all of us to understand that dynamic going forward. So what we've heard, despite expressions of opposition to growth, what we've heard across the board is that if the city must grow, if the city must accommodate more housing, if it must accommodate more jobs, let's do this smartly. Let's do this by efficiently utilizing land in our already urbanized areas, in areas that are already served by infrastructure, in areas that are potentially walkable or maybe already walkable, in areas that are served by transit, et cetera. So we are very pleased to say that whether it's a grudging acceptance that additional growth must be accommodated, or whether it's enthusiasm, and there is some of that, for growth and change, across that spectrum, there seems to be consensus that growth should occur smartly, and it should occur in our already urbanized areas. And we think this aligns really, really well with the Smart and Sustainable Corridors Plan and our intentions under that plan. Residents, particularly in our single-family neighborhoods, want to see us do what we can to preserve the integrity of these neighborhoods, particularly where those neighborhoods abut commercial corridors in areas that are expected to grow. I want to thank Chair Troisi for her engagement on many levels in this project, and for a really astute observation that we need to be mindful of edge conditions. I think that may be particularly true in our denser areas like the downtown, town site, South Oceanside, where we need to be mindful of the diversity of these areas and the distinctions between areas within even the downtown. Don't think of the downtown as this monolithic area, but rather as an area really made up of different neighborhoods with different character. So how do we buffer the more intense uses and areas from the less intense uses and less intensely developed areas? How do we create connections between those areas? How do we help people navigate across these boundaries? This is what we're talking about when we're talking about edge conditions. And that's something that we want to be mindful of. And I thank Chair Troisi for bringing that to our attention. And that is something that will be a key consideration as we look at how we preserve our neighborhoods. Public safety. Again and again, folks are telling us that they have concern about their own safety, the safety of their families within public spaces. They want public spaces to be safe, secure, and they insist that if we can make those spaces safe and secure, and to some extent, there's reality and then there's perception, right, when it comes to public safety and a sense of security. But the more we can do to make our residents comfortable in public spaces, the more they tell us they will come out into those public spaces to help to activate our districts and our streets. Much concern about the visual quality of the city, whether that's within the public realm or on private property, wanting to see better maintenance within the public realm, wanting to see us pursue public art, urban forestry, enhancement of older buildings, upgrading of blighted properties, cleaner sidewalks, and generally day-to-day maintenance, whether that's addressing graffiti, litter, and other dynamics that impact the visual quality of the urban environment. So this not only has a quality of life component to it, it also has an economic development component to it. We want a city that's attractive for visitors as well as for our residents. Folks are very proud of and very invested in the city's recreational and cultural venues. They would in many cases like to see more opportunities for recreation and cultural enrichment. They would like to see better connections between communities and these recreational and cultural venues. They would like to see some of these recreational and cultural venues more amenitized and more programmed. For example, in our parks, what can we do to encourage more use of our many, many parks in the city? And again, how we can help people better access these resources. People feel very invested in open space areas and natural habitat in Oceanside, and obviously we're blessed being a coastal city, being a city that has a large wildland interface to the north and to the east, having these watersheds that provide for natural habitat and provide for visual relief from the urban fabric. These are things that folks very much value, and they want to see these preserved and enhanced. And we do believe that smart growth is the best approach to preserving open space and natural habitat. So it's important for us as we work through this project to be mindful of state, regional, and really national priorities and how those can be supported by this project. It's also important to note that there is some tension between what we're hearing from some segments of the community and what the state and the region expects of us in terms of the city contributing at the local level to the furthering of state and regional priorities. So those include housing. We're in the midst of a housing crisis in California. We're 1.5 million units short of where we need to be to provide adequate and affordable housing to California residents, and the city needs to do its part to contribute to the growth in housing opportunities. That is not necessarily favored by all residents, and it's important to acknowledge that and address that. The state wants us to look at ways to expand mobility options, primarily to reduce vehicle miles traveled and our dependence on the private automobile. We do have many residents concerned about traffic congestion. If we can expand options for transportation, for moving around the city and outside of the city, that should have a positive impact on traffic volumes and traffic flows. Climate mitigation and adaptation. I would say that this has not been expressed generally as a priority of Oceansiders, but we certainly have an obligation, and that's reflected in the energy and climate action element, the climate action plan, to do what we can to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and also adapt to the impacts of climate change, some of which we're already experiencing on our coastline, along our urban interface, and within our inland watersheds. Natural resource conservation is an abiding concern of the state of California. And I think that there's a lot of alignment here between the state's goals in this area and the priorities and values of the community. Environmental justice and social equity. So doing all we can to avoid burdening certain neighborhoods, certain constituencies with undue environmental impacts, doing what we can to distribute resources equitably throughout the city, and make sure that we're engaging all constituents within the city, which is really what we've tried to do in our community outreach. In terms of next steps, we will, once we have comment from HCD, we will be moving the housing element forward for adoption and certification, getting that document to California Housing and Community Development no later than mid-August. Once we have comment from the community and from the council, and we've already received comment from the Planning Commission on the South Mara Hills Community Plan, we will begin to turn that policy framework into a full-fledged community plan. We are beginning to draft a citywide vision, which outlines key planning principles that we think reflect community values, community priorities, as well as the expectations of the state and the region. We will be developing alternatives and ultimately a preferred alternative. Alternatives are essentially different pathways to achieving the goals of the general plan. And we will ultimately choose a preferred alternative. We will study various alternatives in the environmental impact report to understand what the trade-offs are essentially from an environmental standpoint in terms of taking different approaches to achieve our goals. The Smart and Sustainable Corridors specific plan, we will start to develop policies now that we have a strong empirical basis through those technical studies that I mentioned earlier. And we will initiate environmental review. And it's worth noting that the environmental review process is not only something required by the state of California, it's also something that we hope at the end of the day helps to streamline the development review process for projects that accord with the goals and policies of the general plan and that are located in those areas where we want to accommodate growth going forward. So the CEQA process is a very, very important project. So I thank you for your time and attention, and I'm open to your questions about where we go from here.
Are there any committee members who have any questions? Mr. Wright? All right. Well, Russ, I don't know how you sleep. I mean, this is an immense amount of work. And last I checked, we didn't hire 20 new people. So I commend you for such a robust and extensive project management. I don't even know what to say other than to commend you for the amount of effort. And certainly the community outreach has been extraordinary from other cities that I have worked in. And just thank you for your efforts. If no one has...
I have just one comment, and I echo that. This is very comprehensive, and I learned a lot through this today, so thank you. One thing that did strike me, and it's near and dear to my heart, I live here downtown, public safety, community input. You made the comment, perception versus reality. And so when I hear that, it's like, hey, things aren't as bad as people seem to think they are in terms of public safety. Are our residents as safe as they were years ago? And the perception is just that it's not? Can you elaborate on that? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I do very much. And I do think that we need to be mindful both of the reality and how our community members perceive their own safety in certain realms. Not being in law enforcement, in public safety, I am probably not the best resource to respond to that question, but I do know that we have seen a very steady and dramatic decline in crime rates in Oceanside over a 20-year period. That may have plateaued somewhat in recent years, but Oceanside is a much safer community than it was 20, 25 years ago. And we can do more to make folks feel more comfortable in public spaces. And I think part of that, Committee Member Seeberger, is to activate our public spaces, our public realm, and get those spaces get more people into those spaces, get more eyes on the street. I'll just give you one example of a sort of an epiphany I had while I was working on the city's craft brewery and winery ordinance a few years back. I worked with the PD to get a sense of how our drinking establishments, any sort of connection between drinking establishments and the incidence of crime. And we noticed that there was a particular establishment in the downtown area where there were a lot of calls for service. And so we looked into that. Why? Why is that the case? Yeah. Well, what we found is that folks who frequent this establishment, which has created a lot of vitality and activation in this particular block. A lot of these people were mindful as they sat and drank their beer and ate their pizza of activity occurring across the street in an area that had yet to really revitalize and that had become something of a haven for nefarious activity. And they were reporting on uncivil behavior occurring across the street and drawing attention to that area. So I think that speaks to how getting folks into these public spaces really helps, again, put eyes on the street, create that sense of natural surveillance, which should help to mitigate some of what our citizens are concerned about.
Great. No, thank you for that answer, and thanks for your all that you do for this. Appreciate it.
Rush, thank you very much. All right, the next item on the discussion items is the Downtown Advisory Committee Work Plan.
So, Chair and committee members, this is item 5B. The city requires that each committee, commission, advisory committee, advisory board, have a work plan and that they're updated regularly. This is a 2-year work plan, and it's 2 fiscal years. The city's fiscal year starts July 1, so it would essentially go from July 1 of 2021 through June 30th of 2023. So I did not change anything in the purpose, except that it reflects the bylaws, and we'll talk about that in a minute. That's the next item. The composition is the same. I did not change that. And then item number 3 in your work plan goes into items that were just generally already there. What I did change or update was item 6 and item 7. And so that's kind of the meat of the work plan. Again, the purpose has been updated to reflect the draft purpose in your bylaws, so we can come back to that. If that is amended further, it will be carried over into the work plan under the purpose category. So under item 6, this is review and make recommendations to the CDC, which is actually the city council. They fulfill the role as a community development commission, and on the following planning policy matters. So policy is more long range, more visual. What Russ was just talking about is policy, and you can see item 6A is the general plan update. So one item that we anticipate in the next 2 fiscal years is that the DAC will make recommendations regarding appropriate elements of the general plan update. Again, you saw the extensive list that Russ went through. We don't anticipate the DAC making a recommendation on all those elements, but the more pertinent they are to the downtown, we anticipate bringing them through the DAC for a recommendation, comment and recommendation. We are also going through a local coastal plan update. The city's coastal zone essentially follows the back of the first set of buildings east of Coast Highway, Artist Alley, if you were to draw a line continually. There are some variations, particularly for bodies of water, the lagoon, the the river and the creek. But generally speaking, it's west of the Coast Highway and Artist Alley. The staff is still working on this. We anticipate once we get into later phases, including maybe land use policy recommendations, that we would bring that before this body for a recommendation. Zoning ordinance updates is kind of a catch-all. I don't have any in mind at this moment, but similar to the ordinances that Scott Nightingale was talking about earlier, there may be additional zoning ordinance recommendations affecting the downtown zoning ordinance. The downtown zoning ordinance, for the newer members, the downtown area has its own separate zoning ordinance, except for more administrative articles, but the actual zones and the zoning regulations are unique to the downtown. And finally, a specific policy item that we do anticipate is updating our parklet policy. There's been a lot of interest in continuing the relaxation of business regulations concerning parking that was done during COVID. And so the city is going to explore whether we can make some of those parking leniences permanent. So this would affect the downtown dining. I'm sure you've all seen the tents and outdoor dining for the restaurants. There's also some retail and even gymnasiums that are utilizing outdoor space. So if we get direction to continue on with a more permanent policy, then we anticipate that coming before the DAC because it would affect the downtown area. And then item 7 is more specific development projects. The biggest one on that list is 7A. This is the redevelopment of the Oceanside Transit Center that NCTD is initiating. Staff has been in conversations with the Toll Brothers. That's the company that was awarded the contract to facilitate the redevelopment, take the lead on that. And so staff is already working with them. Eventually, once the project gets a little more solidified, we'll bring it to the DAC. Half of that project is in the downtown zoning ordinance that I just mentioned earlier. Half of it is outside the downtown zoning ordinance, which is outside of your jurisdiction. So that one's a little tricky in terms of zoning. There's 2 remaining lots in our downtown area in what's called the 9-block master plan. And these are the lots that are, the one lot is west of the Wyndham and the other lot is, I guess I'd call it north of the Spring Hill. So those 2 vacant lots do have entitlements, but there may be some requests for revision of those entitlements. We're not sure. But in any case, even if they go with the existing entitlements, there would be some review for architecture, et cetera. So we would bring that to the DAC. There's a mixed-use project at 716 Seagaze. This is at Seagaze in Nevada. 7 stories, I believe, over 100 units. And it's very small units, so the density is very high. It's a mixed-use project with a density bonus. We anticipate bringing that to the DAC as one example. I talked to Scott and Richard, who are our downtown planners, and asked them for just the big projects. I wasn't going to put on your work plan, redevelopment of a single-family home or something. I didn't think that was worthy. So that's a big project that we anticipate coming. And then finally, the city has put out an RFP to consider redevelopment of city-owned parking lots where there would be development along with preserving the existing parking. The model is the lot 23, which is west of the Pierview Coffee. So the parking is provided in some kind of structure. And in addition, there's mixed-use visions for those parking lots as well. I believe most of those parking lots in that RFP were in the downtown area, so we would anticipate any final proposals on those coming forward. So that's the work plan. I'm happy to talk about any projects more specifically, or if there's revisions, things you think should be on the work plan or should not be. I'm happy to hear that.
I have a couple suggestions. One is, unique to downtown is the parking issues. Again, perception versus reality. Most importantly, specific to the parking structure, at one time, I'm going to say pre-COVID, there was a big discussion about changing the parking rates and how the areas to have parking meters added. That would be very supportive if that was done to help utilize the parking structure more fully. And since that's unique to downtown, it seemed to me like that would be a good DAC work plan project. But I don't know if that would already be included in some of these other suggestions that you have made. So if so, then obviously it doesn't need to be on its own.
Madam Chair, I don't think it would be included in these existing items. We could add that. It is outside the planning purview. The parking rates are controlled by our Public Works, et cetera. But I don't have a problem with adding it, and we can certainly encourage the Public Works people to bring that forward.
Well, others may feel differently, so I'm just throwing it out there as a suggestion. So I'm not saying that we should. I just think if there's others who feel that parking is something that we should be concerned about, great. And if they don't, we don't need to add it. But it's just a suggestion.
Chair Trotsky, I do want to add, one of the things I've heard from some locals and tourists is that it's difficult finding some of that parking. I know we've reallocated some of those empty lots into underground or structure parking, and maybe it's worth considering not only the rates, but also better advertising those parking spaces for public.
Any other comments? So you can.
So I will add one item regarding downtown parking issues, encouraging the use of the parking structures by reviewing rates and meters, and also improving wayfinding.
Yes.
Does that sound?
That sounds great.
And
Sorry, I'm not sure how to break in here.
Please, Mr. Wright.
I had a little bit of had to re-log in because the video froze, but I would agree with you, Claudia. Any attention on parking is great by any group or committee or commission. So I certainly support that addition to the work plan. And then I also wanted to mention that the PBID is working on a plan for downtown. We're working with the city on signing, that type of thing, because I agree. We have a mishmash of signage, and it's not really helpful in regard to finding the parking that we do have. We have a growing underutilized parking structure, and yet you can see people circling around looking for parking on the weekends especially. So with that note, I would support that addition to the work plan.
And Committee Member Wright, were you suggesting that the P-bid plan come before this body, or you were supporting the parking issue being added?
Just supporting the parking. I would mention the just as information.
I understand. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who has a suggestion or wish to comment?
I was going to, thank you. I was going to comment basically what Rick said. I also sit on the PBID Governing Committee, and I know that the 2022-2023 economic development budget from the PBID is planning to be allocated towards a wayfinding program. The city of Encinitas gave us their program and said that we could kind of use it and make it our own. So I do believe that that's kind of in the agenda with the PBID.
Great.
Ms. Manley.
I don't know if it's within the purview of this committee, but as we're talking about parking and such in the downtown area, I'd like to see some sort of proposal perhaps or space allocation discussion for things like e-bikes and other modes of transportation, such that when we are encouraging folks not to drive down here, they have alternative resources for safely stowing their vehicles while they're walking around town or whatever.
It seems like I can include that in this one new item to be added rather than a separate item.
Okay. All right. Does anyone have any comments on the work plan in general?
I just have a question. The outdoor dining we've seen pop up during COVID on the sidewalks, like on Mission, like the Dairy Queen one comes to mind, and that chicken place that just opened up. Are they going to remain?
There's several scenarios, and some of the outdoor dining is allowed without the leniency that we provided during COVID. And so some of those outdoor dinings actually are permitted or would be permitted. Some of them were permitted during COVID because the city determined that we weren't going to enforce our regulations to give the businesses a break and to give people a break. So those are the ones that would probably come under some kind of review process and determine whether they can stay or not, or if they do stay, what are the conditions under which they would stay. So just so everyone understands, this has to be approved by the council, so we'll put it on. Usually it's just a consent item. It very rarely draws any comments. So you can anticipate that on a future council agenda, and we'll keep you informed.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Downtown Advisory Committee bylaws. Mr. Hunt?
So as opposed to the work plan, the bylaws are very rarely reviewed. In this case, as the saying goes, I had my head under the hood of the car, and I said, well, let's take a look at the bylaws. Quite often these documents, I think the legal phrase we hear is that they get stale. And so I happened to dive into it and look at it. I don't think they've been reviewed in quite a long time. So what I tried to do is, without saying what the DAC should be doing, I tried to update your bylaws to reflect what we have been doing. Before we get into the purpose, which is a little bit more value-oriented or has a little more substantive, I just want to quickly go through the other changes, and a lot of them are just perfunctory. There's talk about alternate memberships. There's removal of a member by the majority of the Development Commission. There's processes that we don't even implement anymore. On the bottom of page 3, there's talk about special meetings. Well, we do have special meetings, but not in accordance with the existing bylaws.
Can I ask a question? Is this information that we would have received ahead of this meeting? Because on the agenda that was mailed to my residents, this is not even on the agenda. And the information that you're discussing, including the work plan, is not something that I received ahead of the meeting.
So
Am I the only one?
There was an early agenda that got sent out, and then there was a revised one that you should have gotten notice on, and it has in bright red letters at the top, revised. So.
Is that via email?
Yes, both of them. The first notice, well, they were both by emails.
Yes, they were.
Yeah, it wasn't in my packet either, but it maybe came through email. Okay.
And we can get you copies, or it is on the webpage right now.
Correct.
And I'm sorry if you didn't get that information. That wasn't our intent. It was just an oversight. So there's some, going over to page 4, there's talk about absence of regular members, and that's no longer feasible. There's voting of alternative members. Off-agenda items, it says that they shall be on the next available agenda. Well, we don't do, it's not mandated. We consider them on the next agenda. There's draft minutes. We post those within a reasonable amount of time. There's the biannual work plan. This is section 5.3 in the middle of page 5 that speaks to, it's a 2-year plan. We don't hold an annual workshop on it. We discuss it every 2 years. At the bottom of page 5, there's a statement of minority views. In my 6 years with the DAC, we have never had a statement of minority views. And then finally, on the last page, it speaks to standing or ad hoc committees. And we haven't really appointed one, but it's a process that may come up. So I just wanted to clarify it. It was confusing. The article spoke to the committee, and then it talked about the ad hoc committee, and it spoke to that committee. And so I just tried to clarify that. And then finally, the expiration. At the bottom of page 6, it says the committee will expire after 3 years unless extended by the community development. And we didn't want that. I think it should be the committee will expire upon a majority vote. So going back to the purpose, what I tried to do is reflect what actually occurs, and I didn't understand some of the language, but really, in my mind, the biggest roles that this committee plays is you make recommendations on 2 items, and we kind of discussed those today. One is policy matters, long-range planning, those regulations, and then you also make recommendations on specific development projects that are reviewed against those long-range policy regulations. And so that's what I tried to reflect. Also, there was some talk about abatement and extension and modification of a non-conforming use, and I wasn't sure why that was in there. It seemed to garner a lot of attention that didn't really warrant it. There was a phrase in there about providing businesses and developers with proactive, qualified, community-based assistance. I wasn't really sure what that meant. So that's it in a nutshell. These are your bylaws. This is just a draft. If you don't agree with the revisions, it's up to this body to make the final recommendation to council. This is a starting point, and we'll carry forward your recommendation to the council. They have to be approved by the city council.
Well, let's start with Mr. Wright. I don't want to forget you, Rick, so do you have any comments or suggestions regarding the bylaws?
I just think I appreciate Jeff looking at the bylaws, because I think they kind of just get approved and forwarded year to year. And I can't imagine they've probably not been looked at for many, many years. So I appreciate his updates, and I certainly trust him to do that correct. So I support the visions.
Okay. Now, is there anyone here present who has comments or suggestions or? Yes, Mr. Andra.
So I do look at a number of bylaws for our business. I think the modifications here actually clear up a lot of items here. I think it looks good, and it would have my support.
I have a quick question. I'm curious how it started out and continues to be a 2-year plan as opposed to a 1-year plan. I'm not opposed to it, just curious. I don't know that I've ever sat on a committee that did 2-year plans, and what's the backstory?
Madam Chairman, I'm not exactly sure, but the direction I got from the clerk's office, which monitors all the city's boards, and they were the ones that told me we needed to update our work plan. They simply said you need to update your biannual work plan. So, okay. And I clarified with them, because biannual is a tricky word. Some people interpret it as twice a year, and some people view it as every other year or once every 2 years.
Right.
So we clarified it's once every 2 years. I think there's some advantages in it in the sense that we don't have to update it yearly. I don't think there's anything that prevents us from doing that.
Okay, just.
I'm sorry. All the work plans for all the committees and commissions were changed to I think it had to do with just clogging up the city council agenda, because it has to go on the agenda, but they just made a blanket change a few years ago that all the work plans would go to every other year.
Makes sense.
Okay. All right, just curious. All right, well, unless anybody has any further questions or comments, thank you, Mr. Hunt, for doing all this work, and we will look forward to City Council CDC approval.
Perhaps we could get a formal vote.
You want to vote?
On both,
Okay.
and maybe you can do them together unless there's some objection to that, the
Sure.
work plan and the bylaws.
All right, all in favor, can I combine them with the bylaws and the work plan?
I'm fine with that if the body is.
So all in favor of supporting the proposed changes to the bylaws and the work plan for 22-23, please raise your right hand. Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Thank you. So all opposed? None?
So we'll record that as 7 favors, 0 against, for recommending support of both the work plan and the bylaws.
Thank you. And then the last item under the discussion items is the appointment of a representative to the Beachfront Feasibility Study Steering Committee for the Junior Sehow Amphitheater, otherwise known as the Bandshell, and Community Center.
So this item involves a steering committee that has been or will be formed in the very near future, and there's been a request to have a DAC member be part of that steering committee. So the project is to look at studies regarding the feasibility of improving the Junior Sehow Amphitheater, the so-called Bandshell, also the Community Center, which is approximate to it, and also, I believe, the lifeguard station and the part of the pier, which is made out of cement, and it's not reflected on your agenda, but I believe that's also part of it. So the steering committee just makes recommendations. Staff will run ideas and concepts by the steering committee. There will be meetings, so it does require a little bit of time commitment, both to attend the meetings and review materials, similar to being on this body. It's usually these kind of appointments are done informally. Somebody nominates or somebody volunteers, and we take as many nominations or volunteers, and then we vote.
All righty. Are there people on this committee who would like to be appointed or would like to volunteer?
I nominate Scott Ashton.
I'm sorry, you nominate who, Rick?
Scott Ashton.
Mr. Ashton, how do you feel about being nominated?
I would be glad to do it. Actually, I was going to nominate committee member Wright, so.
Sounds like the two of you have already talked. Well, I'm leaving it up to both of you. I mean, I'm.
Rick, I would be glad to do it, unless you'd like to take that role.
Yeah, I would defer to Scott. We've talked about this. I know he's really interested in what's going on here. We talked a little bit about it yesterday, actually. So if Scott will accept, that would certainly be my nomination.
All right. Well, then, shall we vote? All in favor of Mr. Ashton being the appointed to the steering committee, please raise your right hand. It's easier. All right. And Mr. Wright made the motion, so I'm going to say he's voted yes. All opposed? Seeing none, it was unanimous.
We'll record that as 7 in favor, 0 against. The motion passes to have Scott be the representative on the committee.
I'm just curious, how many people sit on the steering committee?
That's a good question. I don't know. We've cautioned them not to get it too large because that can get awkward or bulky.
All right. Now comes my favorite part of the whole thing. Mr. Hunt, if you could please give your update to the downtown projects.
Well, first I thought I'd mention and give a little more information on our zoning ordinances that came up today. As I alluded to earlier, a good portion of the downtown is within the coastal zone. Any zoning amendment has to then be certified by the California Coastal Commission after the City Council has adopted it. Until it's certified, it's not effective in the coastal zone. So the downtown has had 2 big zoning ordinances in the last year or so, and one involved removing the density cap. There was a 43 units per acre cap The council directed staff to come back and remove that, keep the existing physical regulations such as maximum height, setbacks, et cetera. But within that building, you can have as much density as you can fit in the building. So the density is units, the number of residential units. The zoning amendment also expanded the transit-oriented district. The transit-oriented district right now is just a little bit around the existing Oceanside Transit Center. We expanded that to be within a half mile of the transit center, and that gives parking reductions to projects within that half mile. The idea being that a number of people will use the transit instead of a car, so you don't need as much parking. Another zoning amendment that we brought forward recently was to add more uses to the downtown area. The downtown zoning district is very restrictive compared to other commercial districts, and we believe the intent was to have a very prescribed revitalization during the redevelopment agency era. There seems to be consensus in our city that that restrictive, prescriptive approach should be loosened, and we no longer need to worry about the past conditions, which seem to have been alleviated to some degree. So we brought forward a zoning amendment to allow uses that are allowed in general commercial areas that weren't allowed in the downtown. Both of those were adopted by council, and now they have been with the Coastal Commission for over a year. And the Coastal Commission is working with us, and quite often they ask for more information. And we provide that information, they analyze it, and quite often they ask for more information. Or sometimes the information we provide them triggers discussion on the information we provided them. It's a very elaborate, it's not spelled out. It's very frustrating, to be honest with you. And we have had talks with the Coastal Commission about how we can expedite that review. And I think, to be fair, they're understaffed. We have one staff person assigned to us. She was working part-time before. I think she's full-time now, but she also works for our other jurisdictions, so her time is split. As Russ alluded to earlier, the general plan for the city is woefully out of date, and a number of our zoning ordinances hadn't been maintained either. A little bit of history for the newer folks is, at one time we had 3 zoning ordinances: the downtown, the coastal, and the inland. And one of our projects recently was to combine them into one zoning ordinance for the administrative articles. Again, the downtown has their own development standards, but all the other articles in our zoning ordinances are across the board, whether it's downtown, coastal, or inland now. That exercise created a lot of work for the Coastal Commission staff. We were throwing a lot of zoning amendments at them. So to be fair to them, the city has been doing a lot of makeup time. Most cities routinely update your zoning ordinance on an annual basis based on legislation or new issues that have come upon us. So we had a lot of makeup time. So I'm trying to be fair to them, but at the same time, we have some zoning ordinance amendments that the Coast Highway Incentive District, I think, was submitted to them in August 2019, and they still haven't got to it. And that's actually a lower priority than the downtown zoning ordinance amendments that I just referenced. So it's a very frustrating process. We are working with them. They have suggested that we just tell them which one to prioritize, and they will focus mostly on that. And that's what we're doing. So we'll keep you informed on that process. But I wanted to elaborate a little bit more on that.
So what is the priority?
The priority is those 2 downtown zoning ordinance, the one on the density and the transit-oriented district, and then the second one on adding more commercial uses.
Okay.
The third one is the incentive district. We've asked them, sometimes they are waiting for another staff member, perhaps, and they have their centralized staff in the Bay Area, so they have their legal people up there or their biologists up there. Sometimes they refer it to their Bay Area district, And we've asked them, well, if you're waiting on the Bay Area District for a response, can't you start working on another one of our priorities? So they've agreed to do that kind of management. So that's the policy level. Similarly, we have site-specific projects that sometimes trigger their review. And a classic example is a Marriott Hotel. For the new folks, that's the Flying Bridge, the Roadway Inn site. And that's, Scott, that's been under their review for what, over a year and a half?
About a year and a half now, yeah.
So they have asked for more information. We provide that information. Sometimes they ask for more again. We finally have narrowed it down. They wanted information on visitor serving facilities that had low income prices. They're concerned that the coastal zone doesn't get to the point where only if you're wealthy can you go to the coastal zone, because all the hotels and accommodations are high-end and expensive. So they've asked us to keep an inventory of our low-cost visitor accommodations, and so we're working on that. I think we've got that straightened out, and now there's a biological issue, and because there's been some habitat that was discovered down along the river near the proposed Marriott Hotel, I think that's the last issue. Scott? That's correct. So that's an example of a more project-specific issue. So on the specific projects, I think we went over the big ones in the work plan, so I won't go into any more projects. I will say that your next meeting, we will add to the agenda election of a chair and vice chair. That's usually done on an annual basis. And also, we hope to have the Planning Commission representative approved by then. So Jolene Hayes, who is a new Planning Commission member, was appointed or nominated by the Planning Commission to be the Planning Commission representative, and they would sit with this body and have a full vote, et cetera. But that nomination has to be approved by council, and it hasn't been done yet. It was just done at the last Planning Commission meeting. So hopefully she or whoever the council approves will join us at the next meeting. And that's all I had.
Your discussion about the Marriott Hotel reminded me, what has happened with the apartments across from the In-N-Out? Is that still going forward? I haven't heard anything.
I haven't heard any news, but I haven't heard any bad news either.
Oh, okay.
And that one was not subject to the certification. They came in under the existing code.
Oh.
So the Coastal Commission certification is not holding that one up.
Great. All right. Good. Good to know. All right. Thank you very much. Last item on the agenda are committee reports. Is there anyone? Well, I'll just go through the names real quickly here. I don't have any additional comments for today. I'll pass. Committee member Wright?
No report, Claudia, thank you.
Committee member Ashton? Committee member Seeberger?
No report, thank you.
Committee member Manley?
Thank you.
Committee member Sweeten?
No report, but I do sit on the Visit Oceanside board and the PBIG governing board. If you ever need comment from there, I'm happy to provide.
Great, thank you so much. And committee member Androv?
I have nothing to report.
All right. Then with that, I think we will conclude the Downtown Advisory Committee. Thank you all for coming. It's been quite a long time since the last time we met. We all look different. Adjourned.